Welcome, my brothers and sisters, to part 2 of this series of lunar solar calendar witnesses from the first century. But before I get started, I want to give all praise and esteem and honor to the Father, Yahuwah, through the name of His Son, Yahushua Mashiach, also known as Jesus Christ. Just want to give all glory and thanks to Him because He's the one who teaches us to follow up into everything, all truth. It all comes from Him. So I want to start off by giving praise to Him. I want to start off first of all as well with Colossians 3:17, where it says, "And whatever you do in word or deed, do all in the name of the Master Yahushua, giving thanks to Elohim the Father through Him." So with that in mind, I wanted to present this information to you guys, and hopefully you can research this for yourselves and not take my own word for it, but let the Spirit teach you and confirm things in your heart. So this is going to be part 2, and in case you haven't seen part 1, please go back and see that about Josephus. So following up with Josephus, I wanted to take the time to look at this because Josephus is going to introduce us into another witness from the first century called Philo of Alexandria. This is from Antiquities of the Jews, as we can see up here at the top, book 18, chapter 8, and we're going to scroll down in paragraph 1 here, just to kind of have a little bit of an introduction. It says here, "Many of these severe things were said by Apion, by which he hoped to provoke Caius to anger at the Jews, as he was likely to be. But Philo, the principal of the Jewish embassage, a man eminent on all accounts, brother to Alexander the Alabarch, and one not unskillful in philosophy, was ready to betake himself to make his defense against those accusations. But Caius prohibited him and bid him be gone. He was also in such a rage that it openly appeared he was about to do them some very great mischief. So Philo, being thus affronted, went out and said to those Jews who were about him that they should be of good courage, since Caius' words indeed showed anger at them, but in reality had already set Elohim against himself." So we see here confirmation of a gentleman named Philo, and he was the principal of the Jewish embassage. Now this account specifically is about how they didn't want to set up statues in all the cities where the Jews were at because they thought it was an abomination, as I do too. But the point is that Josephus gives credit to this person named Philo, and that's where we're going to pick up this study. So if you notice here, the top is called The Works of Philo, Complete and Unabridged. And I'll put my email down in the description for this video. And if you would like a copy of this PDF, you can email me and I'll be more than happy to share this information with you. So to get a little background on Philo, let's go ahead and jump into page 4. And we're going to read this first section. Just so you guys are aware, this document has 2 introductions. One was the original one when this was translated, and then a second one by this gentleman, David M. Scholar. So let's just get into it. Philo, usually known as Philo the Jew, or Philo of Alexandria, a city in Egypt with a large Jewish diaspora population in Greco-Roman times, lived from about 20 BC to about 50 AD. He is one of the most important Jewish authors of the Second Temple period of Judaism and was a contemporary of both Yahusha and Paul. Yet Philo is not nearly as well known or as frequently read as the first century AD Jewish historian Josephus. So people know about this person Philo and the things that he wrote about, but he is not nearly as popular or known because Josephus usually takes the mantle. So I'm going to go ahead and scroll to the second part, the preface to the original edition. This gives a little more background on Philo. The author of the following treatises was, as the title by which he is generally known imports, of Jewish extraction and a descendant of the sacerdotal tribe of Levi. He is spoken of by Josephus as one of the most eminent of his contemporary countrymen and as the principal of the embassy which was sent to Caligula to solicit him to recall the command which he had issued for the erection of his statue in the temple at Jerusalem. So we see here that he was not only of Jewish origin, but he was of the tribe of Levi, and he was the most prominent one out of all of the Jews that were living in the Egyptian area at this time, as we'll see a little further on. Let me go ahead and scroll down to a little bit further, which is pretty good information right here, I think. Starting here, as early as the time of Ptolemy Lagus, many Jews had been settled in Alexandria, and at the period when Philo flourished, they are supposed to have formed half the population of that city. Half! The splendid library of which opened to the learned men of their nation those stores of Greek wisdom and eloquence with which they were previously unacquainted. So, yes, Alexandria had a extraordinary library, works from all over the world. What we would kind of say, oh, the internet of the first century, you know, this is what they had back there. If you want to learn anything about any culture, this is where you would go. So Philo was a very learned man. So I'm going to get into some of these things, that he's not just some guy off the shelf that wrote a couple of pages of history. We're going to see some very detailed accounts of what he understood about the ancient calendar. So I'm going to jump down to page 24 and read a few sections here. This is out of the creation account. One of the reasons for his doing so was that they might give light. This is talking about the heavenly luminaries. Another was that they might be signs. And this is the key part. Another had reference to their dividing the times of the seasons of the year, and above all, dividing days and nights of months and years, which are the measures of time. So Philo is clearly saying the heavenly luminaries are for the divisions of time. Now we're going to get into what he explains as far as the luminaries. So let's jump down to page 32, and we're going to be section 101. So he goes on to do a lot of comparisons to the number 7. He loves the number 7 apparently, but this highlighted portion is very important. The number 7, when compounded of numbers beginning with the unit, makes 20 and 8 a perfect number, and one equalized in its parts, and the number so produced is calculated to reproduce the revolutions of the moon, bringing her back to the point from which she first began to increase in a manner perceptible by the external senses, and to which she returns by waning. For she increases from her first crescent-shaped figure to that of a half circle in 7 days, and in 7 more she becomes a full orb, and then again she turns back, retracing the same path, like a runner of the dialos, receding from a full orb of light to a half circle again in 7 days, and lastly, in an equal number she diminishes from a half circle to the form of a crescent, and thus the number before mentioned is completed. So we see he makes a highlight here of the number 28, because the 7-day weeks are 4, and when you multiply that 4 times 7 you get 28. So that's why I say it's a perfect number. And it says that it's the number so produced is calculated to reproduce the revolutions of the moon. So what is he telling us? That the moon is very significant in calculating the weeks. In another section that we're not going to get into today because it's about the sun, he talks about the sun having its revolutions every single day. Half of the day belongs to the sun, half of the day belongs to the evening stars and the moon. So the sun already has its cycle. The moon regulates the weeks and the months. So let's go ahead and jump down to another quote from him, page 36. I'm gonna get into paragraph 128. I was down at the bottom. So I'll start from the beginning of the sentence. It was also greatly honored by Moses, a man much attached to excellence of all sorts, who described its beauty on the most common pillars of the law, and wrote it in the hearts of all those who were subject to him. Now notice this, commanding them at the end of each period of 6 days to keep the seventh holy. This is very interesting. You pay attention to the details of the words here. He doesn't say that every 7 days is the Sabbath. He says commanding them at the end of each period of 6 days to keep the seventh holy. What is he trying to hint at? I don't know. Let's keep going. Page 47, verse 8. But nature delights in the number 7, for there are 7 planets, going in continual opposition to the daily course of the heaven, which always proceeds in the same direction. And likewise, the constellation of the Bear is made up of 7 stars, which constellation is the cause of communication and unity among men, and not merely of traffic. Again, the periodical changes of the moon take place according to the number 7, that star having the greatest sympathy with the things on earth, and the changes which the moon works in the air, it perfects chiefly in accordance with its own configurations on each 7th day. So what are we starting to see a pattern here now? You know, he's saying that the moon perfects chiefly in accordance with its own configurations on each 7th day. What's the 7th day? This is the Shabbat. This is what he's trying to allude to throughout all his writings. So now we're going to get into another section here, page 673, paragraph 224. Accordingly, in this month, about the 14th day of the month, when the orb of the moon is usually about to become full, the public universal feast of the Passover is celebrated, which in the Chaldaic language is called Pashka. Now this is very clear as far as what he thought the lunar calendar was supposed to be. On the 14th day of the month, of the lunar month, according to Josephus as well, is when the orb of the moon is usually about to become full. And he has to say usually because as those of us who have been keeping the Shabbat according to the lunar solar calendar, we can tell that sometimes the Shabbat comes on the actual full moon. Sometimes it's just slightly before, and sometimes it's just slightly after. It just depends on each month and when you calculate the new moon. Go ahead and go over to another page, 726, verse 189. I'm saying verse, but it should just be line. 189. On the 15th day, at full moon, the feast which is called the Feast of Booths is celebrated, for which the supplies of the sacrifices are more numerous. For during 7 days, 70 young bulls, 14 rams, and 98 lambs are sacrificed, all animals as whole burnt offerings. But the part I wanted to highlight here was on the 15th day of the month, at full moon. Clearly, both Josephus and Philo did not think that full moon was the beginning of the month. They clearly are saying that the full moon, it would be in the middle of the month on the 15th day. This was 726, so our last quote that I'm going to be using is 752, and we're going to go down to line 41. This is the list of the festivals that are set down in the law. The first is that which anyone will perhaps be astonished to hear called a festival, and this festival is every day, so it's just something that he wanted to bring out. The second festival is the 7th day, which the Hebrews in their native language call the Sabbath. And the third is that which comes after the conjunction, which happens on the day of the new moon in each month. And if I had a different type of mic, I would drop it right now, because this is so clear, brothers. He literally says the day after conjunction is the new moon. And so this is just more evidence that I have found thanks to the Father. I wanted to share it with you guys. And again, if you want to have a copy of this PDF, and there's so much information in this one that I couldn't possibly do it all in one video. I would like to keep these videos short, but there's just a lot of gems that explain and give the breakdown from a non-Talmudic source, which is very important. We don't want to be led astray by listening to a lot of these Talmudic teachings. He is simply trying to break down the information so that the audience, which more than likely would have been Hellenists, Greeks, Romans, Egyptians, so that they could understand these things. And again, Josephus gives credit to Philo, as we just saw, so we have nothing to fear here. So I hope that this has been a blessing to you. I hope that it opened your eyes to something new, and may you continue on in your studies and be blessed. Shalom, brothers.